Hey, what's up guys? It's the Honest Gamer here with Quantic Media, bringing you a history of Final Fantasy. During this first episode, I will cover the first 2 games in the series. To begin, let's set our minds back to 1987. In Japan, an awesome guy called Sakaguchi was making a last-ditch attempt at the gaming industry. This is where originally the rumour began that Square was set to go bankrupt, so aptly named their new game Final Fantasy. However, Mr. Sakaguchi states it's due to the fact that he was either going to make it in the industry or quit and go back to university. Thankfully though, for us fans, the game was a success after he managed to convince his bosses to make 400,000 copies, all of which did sell and allowed for a sequel to be made. Now, the history of Final Fantasy is a long and fantastic one, full of individual games that always share similar elements, such as the battle system, the world map, and vehicle travel across it. Additionally, most of the games have shared the same kind of storyline, a good group fighting against a large evil force, whilst the character also battles with a personal and individual struggle of their own. I personally feel that no other RPG has influenced modern role-playing games quite as much as the Final Fantasy series has. With a history spanning over 2.5 decades, I will be giving an overview of all of the core games. So ensure that you stay tuned as I walk you through the history of Final Fantasy. Our story begins with Final Fantasy. Originally released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1987, it did a lot of new things for the role-playing game genre that other less successful games such as Dragon Quest, released a year prior, failed to do. Admittedly, perhaps some aspects were taken from Dragon Quest, but were redesigned into making a better overall game. Sakaguchi's game instead was able to popularise a pretty unknown genre, especially outside of Japan via its improved storyline. The game was since 1987 also released under various different names and packages, first redesigned in 1989 by Microcabin for improved graphics and sound and released on the MSX2 system. It was then redesigned a few more times and often packaged alongside the second game. It featured a remake for the PlayStation 1, Game Boy Advance in 2004 and the Wii in 2009, and at various other stages mobile phones and other consoles as well. It was this Final Fantasy which would unleash and influence nearly 25 years worth of role-playing games in the future. So the game kicked off with a simplistic but gripping storyline, in which 4 orbs, Earth, Fire, Water and Wind, have gone dark over the course of several hundred years. This was caused by some evil forces called the Elemental Fiends, who sought to bring the world to ruin. However, the presence of the 4 Light Warriors shook things up, and during their journey they were able to combat the forces of darkness and restore natural order. At the start of the game, you the player would choose from a whole host of different classes, such as the Thief, Black Mage, Red Mage and so on and so forth, and choose 4 characters, naming them as you went along. The graphics were pretty good for back in 1987, and development was smooth enough to implement everything Square wanted to put into the game. Dialogue was simplistic and the music was good enough to stick throughout the ages and be redesigned again and again to be used as one of the series' most recognised theme tunes. Battle was incredibly simple, choosing from doing regular attacks to using magic and items. It was a turn-based system that hadn't been seen before, laying out the fight in such a way that the player could see the whole battlefield from above and direct attacks accordingly. Finally, you could buy and sell items using gold which you gathered from chests or having beaten enemies during a random encounter, in various stores around the world, trading for useful items such as weapons and armour to equip and enhance your character's stats in battle. Additionally, at these shops you could also buy several items which would help you recover after a battle. These were potions and tents which would restore a character's hit points and remove ailments such as poison and petrify, and whilst on the world map would also allow you to save your game. Final Fantasy was overall received well by the critics Sakaguchi could actually reach to review it, as initially he was turned down by larger magazine companies who didn't wish to waste their time on such a small project from Square. However, it eventually reached the hands of Famitsu, who gave it a lot of coverage. The game was praised for its storyline over that of Dragon Quest, and for having a decent combat system with a diverse class system. The game did however fall down to reviewers on its heavy reliance on the player having to continuously find random world encounters to level up and gather gold to help fight against the toughness of some of the later bosses. Overall, the first Final Fantasy really brought about a season of change to the role-playing game genre, and gave a lot of happiness to fans worldwide. It also allowed for a fantastic game designer to go on and create more great games in the future. In 1988, Square developed the second game, Final Fantasy II, which held all of the same successful game mechanics of the first, but with improvements all around. It was again released for the Nintendo Entertainment System and received remakes over time for the Water Swan Color, which was an old handheld console produced by Bandai in Japan, and the Game Boy Advance, PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation Portable. The story was again simplistic, as it centered around 4 youths whose parents had been murdered during the invasion of an army from the Empire of Palamecia. Throughout the game, 3 of your 4 companions join a rebellion and fight through various missions to destroy enemy super weapons, gain new magic and weapons, and rescue leaders of the resistance. After having defeated the Empire and its leader, however, the trio learn that their 4th member has sadly become a Dark Knight and has taken up the mantle of leader of the enemy and plans to launch a counterattack against the resistance. However, when able to confront their former ally, the old defeated Emperor reappears as a demon who attempts to destroy the world. So the 4 again join forces and battle the demon, eventually defeating him. Gameplay during Final Fantasy II was very similar to the first game, however this time around it featured enhanced graphics and sound, which was created by Nobu Uematsu, who once created the music for the first game. It also introduced several elements that would become popular reoccurring trademarks of the Final Fantasy series, such as chocobos being seen for the first time, and also the reoccurring character named Sid, who would go on to star in every subsequent game. The developers chose to do away with the popular experience point leveling system used during Final Fantasy and its sequels, instead going for an activity-based progression system in which the character's stats would increase according to how often they were used. This really wasn't a system that I personally favoured. The game again allowed for players to travel a world map, using the same vehicles as in the last game but with additions. Returning was the canoe and boat, as well as the airship, but new to the screens was the snowcraft to traverse the icy north, and of course the lovable yellow chocobo. Another improvement to be mentioned was developing a back row during battle. This gave you the choice of placing your stronger characters at the front, defending your weaker players at the back from physical attacks, and only being susceptible to magic or arrows. Lastly, the game featured 2 more independent improvements over the last game, which was firstly that your character would meet non-playing characters whom would join your quest for an amount of time. It led to having a human connection with them during the story when they, for example, fell in battle defending you and so on. The second improvement was the use of extra dialogue during conversations, which allowed you to pick out items in your inventory that meant something to the other character and show them it forwarding on the story. Both of these advancements led to further modernise and improve an already outstanding role-playing game formula, and these additions would stick for the ages. It was also during this game that fights took on a whole different look, where enemies and playing characters were no longer shown in different screens but instead shared one, allowing for a more realistic looking battle scene between yourself and your foes. The game hit mostly favourable reviews inside of Japan, where it stayed almost exclusively until its release on other platforms, allowing it to travel to gamers around the world where it got a decent reception. The title was praised for its length and improved storyline in which playing characters could feel sadness as well as happiness. The character could also be involved in romantic situations, and finally members of your team did die during the storyline, giving it a much more real feeling for reviewers and players alike. Despite several remakes and tens of thousands sold just for the PSP's remake in Japan and North America, the game actually sold less than any of the other main games in the series. However, the success it did see allowed for the creation of the third game a couple of years later. Okay gamers, for now that's all from me. For more reviews, previews and history of videos, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on Twitter at TheHonestGamer to stay up to date with all of my newest upcoming video releases. And as always, it's The Honest Gamer here with Quantic Media, and happy gaming.